was a quote about the passion of reading, and it was used by the bookstore company Waterstones as part of a marketing campaign that I remember. I would have seen this quote branded onto their sales bags, amongst many other quotes. But this one in particular stayed with me. It's by the philosopher Charles de Montesquieu, and he said, "I have never known any distress that an hour's reading did not relieve." I can't quite decide if I think he said this at a time in his life where he had not yet felt the brute force of the sharp edge of life, or whether he was just a strange and special breed of fish that could truly escape his lot through the written word. Whatever the circumstance, the quote stays with me because I find it a comfort and a curiosity whether I agree with him. There is a book that is particularly special to me because when I read it, it can feel like a tonic for the soul. I read it when I'm happy. I also read it when I'm not so happy. The man who wrote it was a Roman philosopher from the 1st century AD. He was first a tutor to a 12-year-old boy who became known as the Emperor Nero, and later this tutor became Nero's advisor. His name was Seneca. The book is called Letters from a Stoic. It is a compilation of 124 letters from the time he spent corresponding at the end of his life with a young man named Lucilius. Lucilius was a native of Pompeii and procurator in Sicily at the time. There is so much about Seneca's life focus on his teachings here, but I should first set out a few things about his beliefs and approach. Seneca was a Stoic philosopher, a dramatist, and a statesman. Amongst his life achievements that make up a long legacy, he is credited with being the founder of the essay, and it was in the last years of his life that he devoted himself to writing and philosophy. He lived and taught a kind of philosophy that went against the grain of what many people think of when they think of philosophy. In fact, he spoke at length of his impatience towards philosophers who waste their time on verbal puzzles or logical hair-splitting. His tremendous faith in philosophy was a belief that philosophy was practical and capable of curing souls, of bringing peace and order to the feverish minds of men pursuing the wrong aims in life. He wrote, "Philosophy teaches us to act, not to talk." The beauty of Seneca is that he is still so completely relevant today. It is easy when reading him to forget that his words and thoughts were written 2,000 years ago. You'd be forgiven for thinking it sounded like a self-help manual published last week. But while he is timeless for us, he was positively way ahead of his time during his life. This is a man who lived during the time of the gladiator arenas used for entertainment. He spoke extensively of his disapproval of such barbarity and senseless violence. He was disgusted by the accepted treatment of slaves, and this remarkable attitude for the time, which was also an element of Stoicism, played no small Stoicism had the tendency to always exalt man's importance in the universe rather than to abase him before a higher authority. For Seneca, virtue was to be looked on as its own reward, and vice as its own punishment. Despite all this, Christian writers have not been slow to recognize the remarkably close parallels between isolated sentences in Seneca's writings and verses of the Bible. A few examples are: money the root of all evil. We came into the world naked and go out of it naked. We are members of one body. Not even thoughts are hidden from God. The sun rises on the wicked as well. I was going to read letter 3, which is a nice essay that Seneca wrote on friendship. It's quite short, shorter than many of his other letters. And he talks about how to make the right friendships and how seriously to take them. But in the end, I have chosen to read a passage from letter 9 because I think it's particularly nice. The wise man, self-sufficient as he is, still desires to have a friend, if only for the purpose of practicing friendship and ensuring that those talents are not idle. Not, as Epicurus put it in the same letter, for the purpose of having someone to come and sit beside his bed when he is ill, or come to his rescue when he is hard up, or thrown into chains, but so that, on the contrary, he may have someone by whose sick bed he himself may sit, or whom he may find himself release when that person is held prisoner by hostile hands. Anyone thinking of his own interests and seeking out friendship with this in view is making a great mistake. Things will end as they began. He has secured a friend who is going to come to his aid if captivity threatens. At the first clank of a chain, that friend will disappear. These are what are commonly called fair weather friendships. A person adopted as a friend for the sake of his usefulness will be cultivated once being friends with you because it pays him, will similarly cease to be friends because it pays him to do so. If there is anything in a particular friendship that attracts a man other than the friendship itself, the attraction of some reward or other will counterbalance that of the friendship. What is my object in making a friend? To have someone to be able to die for, someone I may follow into exile, someone for whose life I may put myself up as security and pay the price as well. The thing you describe is not friendship, but a business deal, looking to the likely consequences with advantage as its goal. There can be no doubt that the desire lovers have for each other is not so very different from friendship. You might say it was friendship gone mad. Well, then, does anyone ever fall in love with a view to a profit, or advancement, or celebrity? Actual love in itself, heedless of all other considerations, inflames people's hearts with a passion for the beautiful object, not without the hope, too, that the affection will be mutual. How then can the nobler stimulus of friendship be associated with any ignoble desire? I find that to be one of the most beautiful insights into friendship that I've ever heard. His humanity just reaches off the page and touches me. I think what I love most about Seneca is not that he presents particularly earth-shattering new wisdom. It's that he's so articulate in his observations. His essays consolidate and reaffirm the same thoughts that I also have, and organizes them into a vision of clarity. And when things seem clear, I find myself able to look closer at my own values, to ask questions, to reevaluate things, to hold and measure up to them and discard or accept what I feel is true. All the subjects he speaks about are problems that face us today as well. 2,000 years separates us, but he somehow feels like a long-lost friend. I read Seneca's letters